to Colin, and he's ready. So I sent him the link. So I think we're good to go.
Okay. We're live, it says. Um, Great. Well, here we are once again, April 10th for our GEO monthly live stream. Um, Maybe we will wait to get started here until we see some confirmation in the chat that we've got sound and all the technical stuff is working all right.
Yeah, I'm hoping that my headphones aren't picking up this lapel mic.
Seems pretty good. All right. And
Has Ajowa had a chance to say anything yet?
Testing,
nobody.
testing. One, two.
There's some slight feedback. Colin says.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, I think it's my lapel mic. Let's see. Let's try this. I'm gonna switch the microphone to
Okay.
the camera's microphone. How does that sound? Does it sound that much different?
Nope. We lost your mic, Chris.
You can't hear me right now?
Please stand by for figure out our tech. Hello. Ajowa, Chris, are you hearing me?
Yes, very
Okay.
clearly.
All right, can you hear me again?
Yes.
Yes.
You're back. All right. We're all good.
Okay. Yeah, Colin. Okay. Let me just ask Colin one last time. Um, so what I did was I tried to see if I could change my microphone source, just to solve that feedback issue. But then it wasn't picking up, so then I went back to using my lapel mic. If I just lowered the lapel mic, hopefully
Maybe that was the issue.
hopefully that solves it.
Learn by doing.
Absolutely.
Make the road as we walk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds fine on this end.
All right. Yeah. If I'll just wait one final confirmation from Colin. If it's all good, then we'll just run with it. All right. He says it sounds better, and
Okay. All right. And
let's see. He's writing one last thing. Oh, he says there's a soft crackling in the background.
soft crackling.
Okay. He says we're good. It says not too distracting.
Okay. All right. Well, we shall
Yeah.
sully forth then. Yeah. So our monthly live stream for April 2023. My name is Josh Davis. I'm the content manager. What am I? I'm the content manager for Grassroots Economic Organizing. Ajowa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Ajowa Ifateo. I'm a co-editor and I'm in Washington, D.C.
Hey, I'm Christopher Preciado here helping with the tech, and right now I'm in San Antonio, Texas.
All right. So we are spread all over the place. Well, this week or this month, I thought we could take this time to maybe just talk a little bit in general terms about worker cooperatives and specifically why we're into them. Why are they so important to us? Why do we care so much? And maybe give a little bit of our backgrounds for people, just kind of how we got into them. I thought that might be interesting. So, um, would anybody like to start us off with some thoughts? Since it's my idea, should I start?
Go for it.
Yes, why don't you start, Josh?
Okay. All right. So I a little bit of background. Before I discovered worker co-ops, before I knew anything about cooperatives, I did a degree in economics at the University of Montana in Missoula. Um, and after I graduated from that, from with that degree, I, as a graduation gift, I got a plane ticket, and I went to Nepal for 3 months. I taught English, volunteer as a volunteer for in exchange for room and board, so not entirely volunteer, but I taught English there for about 5 months, and while I was there, I got hooked up with this Hindu holy man, this ascetic living up on a hill, who asked me if I would help him raise what was it, 3,000 or no, $5,000 to build a village school there. And he apparently asked the right guy, because I kind of couldn't say no. Seemed like just such a cheap price, and definitely, a needed service for the community, something that I really thought I could do, and we did end up doing. But the as far as worker co-ops go, what that meant for me was, after I graduated from college, I spent the next decade about going back and forth to Nepal working on this project, which ended up being a much more of a big deal than I thought it was when I said yes, of course. But as a result of that, it made it basically impossible to do the normal like career path thing. And so I found myself with an economics degree, just, working the same manual labor jobs that I had done while I was in college, for the most part. Um, and, because when I was like quitting my job, leaving the country for 1 or 2 months every year to go to the other side of the world. So that's like, you can't really hold a job. And I was only able to do that because for a while, credit was pretty easy before the 2008 crash. And then thereafter, I just worked a lot of jobs and lived very cheaply, to be able to afford that. But the jobs that I was working were, again, being a housekeeper, being at a nursing home, being a janitor at a church, delivering appliances, waiting tables at a Japanese restaurant, um, doing home health care, doing just housekeeping for people, through like a temp agency, um, all kinds of, this kind of stuff. I'd cleaned I worked at the city bus company and, cleaned a lot of public bathrooms in different places. Um, and one of the things that I realized as I was working all of these jobs was how degrading it is in this country to be a manual laborer. If you do a job that requires your body, and this seems like the more essential it is for just the basic functioning of society, the less respect you get for it, the less, generally the less money you get for it. But it wasn't really the money that was the biggest problem for me, and I didn't mind the work. Even I didn't mind cleaning up a public bathroom. Like, hey, I use public bathrooms. I know that it sucks when they haven't been cleaned. So yeah, I'll be the guy who goes and cleans them. Like, you're all welcome. Yeah, I can something I feel a little bit good about, even if it's not exactly the funnest thing to do. But it was the disrespect, right? Not only from managers, also from customers, and I was working like the graveyard shift at a convenience store slash casino. um, you know, getting disrespected by like 17-year-olds, who trying to buy beer in the middle of the night, and then they, and you just have to take it. Um, and then the same kind of thing from like prospective in-laws and stuff like that. Nobody wants to hear like, oh, what do you do? Like, I push a broom. That's and even when thankfully I ended up working for my buddy for several years painting houses, and I was a little better, but still, there's somebody who again, I graduated with honors, a degree in economics, supposedly a fairly you know intellectually rigorous degree or whatever, and I find myself painting houses, for upper middle class, people in Missoula who treat you like an idiot, and that's kind of how everybody just treats you like an idiot as a manual laborer. So 2011 comes along, Occupy happens in Missoula, just like every place else. I'm at Occupy. Um, Imagine myself to be a bit of a poet, and I had written a little poem about basically how I thought the union movement, while good, was insufficient because even after a successful strike, we still end up with the same, capital labor relationships that, and that, we workers need to control the means of production. That was wrote a little poem about that right at the Occupy there. And some women who, heard that came to me afterwards, and they're like, oh, do you know about Richard Wolff and worker co-ops? And you should look him up. So I did, and then I ended up finding GEO. But when I, just discovered worker co-ops, it was such an obvious thing to me, for once, because I'd worked at so many of these jobs where, those of us doing the actual work, we like talk like, do you know what the manager does? I think he just orders stuff, right? He just orders stuff and then like makes the schedule. Like, couldn't we do that? Like, I've had this conversation like in more than one job. Like, we could do the manager's job. And so it made sense that, you have that. And then, when I, start learning about places like cooperative home care associates, um, you know, like incredibly moving, incredibly powerful to me to like, here is a way that you can do just, a job that needs to get done. And that, it's the jobs that I'm doing. Home health care. I've definitely been there, I've done that. And in a way that you get the respect of also being a business owner and not just a pair of hands, right? And that's what, to me, as somebody with, a little bit of a overactive intellect or whatever, like I want to be respected. I want to be treated, like an intelligent human being. And it was like, oh, there's a way you can do, manual labor and, do these jobs that are so important and not have to deal with that disrespect. So for me, that was the big draw, and I guess why I'm so adamant, and I get like kind of bent out of shape when I feel like when I see in the worker co-op movement a dynamic that works against that kind of recapitulates this idea from the mainstream economy that like people who do manual labor basically can't think for themselves. And and sadly it still shows up sometimes in the worker co-op movement, not nearly as much, thankfully. But anyway, so there's my story, or at least a part of it. I'll leave it there. If anybody wants to ask me a question, you can go for it, or you can just follow on with your own.
Okay, yeah, there was another co-op that you work with. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so the After I got involved with GEO, I got involved with GEO initially because I was trying to get connections to worker co-ops so that I could work at one. Um, I ended up working for GEO, of course, but that wasn't the idea. Initially, I wanted to work at Arizmendi. That was my dream because I had been an overnight baker. I'd made muffins
Ah,
and scones when I was in college at Bernice's Bakery in Missoula, and it was one of my favorite jobs. And it's so rewarding to get done with the shift and have this beautiful case full of baked goods that people like come in and just devour. The idea of doing that in worker co-op was amazing. So, I started volunteering with GEO and, hoping, oh, maybe I'll get some like connections here and maybe I can work my way into a job and move out to San Francisco or something. Um, but that didn't end up happening. But, what ended up happening was as kept working with GEO and just kind of learning more about worker co-ops and getting to talk with people like you and Ajowa and Jessica, Gordon Nimhart and Jim Johnson, and people with so much experience. So I start talking about worker co-ops to the people that I'm hanging out with in Missoula, and one of my friends invites me to this get together with a bunch of people, and they're throwing around business ideas for sustainable businesses and basically a bunch of young hippies. I'll say that is just give people the wrong idea. Basically, a lot of 20 somethings, very idealistic, and had about 50 different ideas for sustainable businesses, and one of them was brewing kombucha. And after about a year and a half process of kind of going through and sorting through the business ideas, that was the one that fell out as actually like maybe feasible to do. And so I myself, I'm not really into kombucha. I had some concerns with just the product itself. It requires constant refrigeration, at least the way that they do it. I didn't want to be involved personally, but I did definitely want to help them do it, and they expressed interest in forming it as a worker co-op. So I helped them do that, set it up. Just kind of, I sat on their board for the 4 years that they were a co-op, just as a pro se member, and kind of got to see the what it's like to set up a worker co-op from scratch without knowing a lot. And um, yeah, there was a lot of takeaways from that. Uh, it it had a very rough start. When you start a worker co-op, a lot of the people with experience will tell you don't expect to quit your day job for at least a couple of years. You're gonna, it's not gonna be paying your bills. You're gonna be working for free for a while. It's just part of the small business thing, and they ran into that. But after 4 years, it was still they were sometimes able to pay themselves $10 an hour. You um, and so seeing the reality of that, like you can put in a lot of work and you can have a business that outwardly looks successful, and feel, oh, that's great, but it's like the reality is everybody's working for like $3 an hour to make that happen. And so that kind of sustainability thing became an issue. There was also issues around just personality conflicts. One of the founding members had to be removed for good cause. This is somebody who I would say just had a bit of a narcissistic personality, but all kinds of issues. But just one of the major ones, and the continual ones, was this person would have an idea for how to structure the co-op, and usually something to do with the finances, that the rest of the group wasn't really into. We'd have a big conversation about it using our nonviolent communication and sociocracy that we'd all agreed to, and we'd come to some consensus agreement, some kind of compromise to make her feel good and everybody else was okay with, and we'd move on. And then a couple weeks later, at a weekly meeting, bring it up again, the exact same issue, and relitigate. And we'd have the same conversation. It get, it could get heated, but then we'd always figure out some issue. We figure it out, and everybody, hug at the end of the meeting, and it's fine. And we think we have it figured out, and 2 weeks later, just bring it up again. And it was very much around control of the business and control of any money that might be made from it. Um, Ended up having to, yeah, they, went through the process and the bylaws for voting her out, got, paid her money back, the entirety of her investment, member share, and everything. And then she proceeded to sue the company for $2 million.
Oh
And
my
this was a
God.
this was a business with like $3,000 or $4,000 in the bank on a good day. Um, yeah, it was totally ridiculous, but it caused a lot of stress and headache for people, and it cost a lot of money for lawyers, and it was a big old pain in the butt. And it was, kind of gratifying to actually get to see a judge shut this person down and tell them, like, you don't know what you were talking about, and you sound insane. That was nice. But yeah, so big lesson learned there was really know the people that you're getting involved with, because this particular person, and really everybody who started it, it may have known each other for a year or two, kind of worked together at the natural grocery store, um, but this person was just kind of came in, had money, had several $1,000s at a time when they really needed it. So that was something. But after the whole thing, everybody said, "Oh, wish we hadn't, wish we could gone a little bit slower with that." Um, and then, yeah, because of the problems paying them, they had over the years paying themselves, because they were in constant expansion mode. Every dollar that came in was just going back into the business. One of the members was, gave at some point like a 9 months, like, if we can't pay ourselves regularly after 9 months, I'm going to have to stop. I can't just keep donating my life. I can't keep working for free. And it's been, 4 years, three
Mm.
at that point, and so, and there wasn't, again, there was a lot of, you know, uh, communication was not great. And one of the major dynamics in that group was one person who was very passionate and very hard-headed and very strong-willed, and just kind of bulldozed people and other people who would, let them do that. And, I, as being somebody who's just kind of sitting in on the board meetings, but not really, having a vote or anything, I would try to put my 2 cents in here and there and try to get some pushback if it seemed like, I can, maybe tell that it's maybe people aren't super excited with what this guy is saying, but they're just going to go along with it because they don't want to have a fight. Um, so at any rate, that guy ended up, it's like no changes were made to the business. They never were able to pay themselves regularly. So another member quit. So I had one member removed, one member just left of his own accord. And then when it was just down to two, the interpersonal dynamic got incredibly toxic. um, and that ended with the uh, last guy leaving. And then there was one, and it's no longer a co-op. And it's now just one guy working for, trying to, barely scrape by, and, pays himself $5 an hour. So there were a lot of lessons from it. It didn't go well, but it taught me a lot. I was fortunate that I got to see this process and be there for the whole thing, but not have to have my money and, more than just my time at the meetings at risk from that. I feel really bad for the two guys who, um, went in, had all the, best intentions and did their best and really tried. But, um, well, one, it's a gamble, like everything. You never know if it's going to work out or not, any business. And two, it's just really hard to go from our society and how we are all enculturated to working actually cooperatively. And that was a big lesson, was like, because, they were very explicit about not being hierarchical, making decisions by sociocracy, using nonviolent communication, and none of that mattered because in the meeting there was definitely a hierarchy. And it's the guy with the passion, and the bullhead who's, you know, gets
With the biggest
be,
mouth.
with the biggest mouth becomes the leader. I mean,
Hmm.
just by default, because um, and people fall into that because we're so habituated to it, to
Right.
somebody being at the top, even
Yes.
if we're saying that we're not. We don't want to be like that. So um, it was also a big lesson to me about the importance of doing proper business planning, which is something I had, like, as the kind of person trying to just say, hey, this is what everybody else who develops worker co-ops, this is what they say you should do. Like, I don't know because I haven't done this, but this is what everybody else says, the people who do know. um, and it didn't happen, right? There was not really a good market survey. There was just some very rough estimates. Like, they knew how much the largest natural food store in town, like a couple of them worked there, and so they knew how much kombucha that place sold. And then, like, they just took that and just kind of made some numbers. Oh, well, maybe we can get half of that market, and so it ended up being, I think, very optimistic. They started out with 4 people, and in a very, like, difficult business, like brewing a fermented beverage that you got to bottle. And I mean, there's all these hoops to jump through. It's not like doing housekeeping or something that is relatively straightforward. Um, yeah, no way. I don't think that at the scale that they started, there was no way that it could ever, like, support 4 people, right? It seemed like it could maybe support 2 when they got down to 2. It seemed like, okay, well, maybe it's, that's the right number, but you know being realistic, and the necessity, I think, of being really hard-headed about this, the kind of business and financial end of things, is so important. Because especially, for people like me, and people that I know, my friends, like, none of us have a whole lot of money. It's not like we're sitting on an extra $20,000 we can just burn. And it's like every little bit counts. And it's you don't want to end up investing a bunch into a business that wasn't well thought out, and then also investing a bunch of your time. So, and I feel like, as people who encourage other people to start worker co-ops, like, that's an important part, an important aspect. Don't just, I don't want to go up and be like, oh, it's great, yeah, no, just do it, it's wonderful. It's like, it's really hard, it's a lot of work, there's definitely
Hmm.
risk involved. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not, I still support it, but I don't want to give people the wrong idea. So
Right. Everybody's
uh,
not cut out for this kind of work. To your point about being indoctrinated to be individualistic or just really concerned about self is really well taken, as well as getting to know the people that you are going to co-op with. I like to compare it to a marriage. You really want to know this person very well because things are going to happen. You're going to have an argument. And what does the person do when you have a disagreement? Do they sulk and not talk, or do they flap the handle and won't discuss things? You want to know all those things so that you can know how to move forward or move forward in the best way. So, yeah, those are big issues. But so I got involved in the worker co-op movement through school. I attended the Southern New Hampshire University in Manchester, which had the first community economic development program in the country. And so I had been doing a lot of organizing, and I saw that we worked a lot, but we didn't have any institutions. We rebel roused, we demonstrated, but what did we have to show for it? What kind of institution? And so the whole idea of a CED was really appealing to me for that reason, so that we could build something. And I took Chris Clamp's class on cooperatives, and So Chris took us to Boston, which was an hour away, to visit Equal Exchange and another co-op that was a recycling co-op. But I think before, let's see, I'm getting my times mixed up. Oh yeah, so um, right. So we went there, we heard those presentations from Equal Exchange about how the workers manage everything, how they had some investors, but they were mainly nuns who wanted to do a good deed by putting their money in, but did not expect any kind of control or power in the co-op. And it was just the most exciting thing to me that people could run their own businesses. And everybody, they talked about people knowing each other's jobs so that, everybody can do everything. And it was just really exciting to be there at that space, to walk around and see them roast coffee, their offers and what everybody did. It was just amazing to me. And then when we went to the recycling place, that was less exciting, but it was great that you can start a co-op with stuff that people were giving away or throwing away. It was just like, a place to go buy, say, a stove. They would take these stoves that people had didn't want, fix them up, clean them up, and somebody who needed a stove at a cheap price could come in and buy it. And so that got me started. Hearing about Mondragon was exciting. For one reason, I felt like hearing their story about how they were not allowed, the Basque people were not allowed to speak their language, and they started their own school so that they could speak their language. I was like, wow, this is great. I mean, it was, to me, I made comparisons to them and Black people in this country being colonized and not having a lot of say so in our lives. And so I thought, wow, these co-ops could be a way for Black people to gain some economic power, to control our own lives and stuff. And so I was excited about Mondragon. And by this time, a friend of mine who had gone to Southern New Hampshire had started to put together the idea of a housing cooperative. And so I started meeting because that sounded exciting to have your own housing co-op. And at that point, Chris Clamp, my instructor, had told me that there was an African American researcher who lived in DC and that I might want to hook up with her. And I was so excited. Turned out it was Jessica Gordon Nimhart, and she lived about 10 blocks from me. I called her up. She invited me to brunch, and we talked. And yeah, I think at that point I had just finished the CED part, Community Economic Development, and was considering going to get the MBA as part of that. Well, not, it was a separate degree, but something to do. Like if you're going to do this work, you need to really understand business. So Jessica talked me into going for that degree. She also started organizing for the first Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy. So she invited me to the first conference. And I met construction workers in Boston who had a co op. I believe Tim Hewitt was there from Aris Mende. There was just all these co-op. Hazel Corcoran was there from Canada. All these co-op people were there. They were very friendly. They were very smart. They referred to themselves as the graybeards because some of them had been in the co-op movement for 30 years, and so they had gray beards, and so it was just really exciting. And I heard Collective Copy speak, um, a young white woman named Erin, and she talked about co-ops and how co-ops were going to colonize the world. And I just was like, oh, we could do this. We could do this. So they ran a coffee shop. Well, you just, print copies, and I think they printed other stuff, booklets, posters, and stuff. And so I got the idea that we could do that business in DC. It was, didn't need a whole lot of money to start up. We can just get a couple of copy machines and, have us a co-op. So a friend, one of my best friends and another woman, we met for like a whole year planning out. We got what we could from collective copies. We, planned up our HR policy. We found a space where this guy he had a copy shop. He did some other printing stuff, but he was wanting to get rid of his business. So we planned everything, meeting weekly for a whole year. And then when it came time to really like get with the money, there was two things that happened. One person, most of us didn't have, good credit or anything. The person that did have it, oh, so there were four of us, yes. The person who did have it all of a sudden started to get a little uncertain about how this might affect her credit. um, you know, it was like second thoughts. And I think a friend of hers was telling her, oh, you shouldn't put your money into that. You don't know how that's going to turn out. You may end up, you know, suffering from this. So that was going on. And then the other thing was, it came down to quitting your job. So who was going to quit their job to work on this co-op full time? And unlike you, we just couldn't make that leap. It was like, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to eat? We got scared. We didn't have the means to get a loan. Um, we had to tell this guy who really wanted to sell to us because it was his life business, and he wanted somebody from the community, and he wanted, to keep the business there. But of course, we didn't have the money. So anyway, we ended up not being able to open it up after all that work and excitement. We were all very excited about it. So I never really worked in a co-op, but I do, but I lived in a co-op while all of this was also going on. So I really identify with, some of the issues. Um, you have to do the business plan. I think we did work on some business planning stuff. The big thing is people. People will often resort to that colonizer behavior of wanting to be in charge, or feeling like because they have more education that they can, bulldoze over people. Um, Getting power hungry, all kinds of issues. Also like not wanting to be um, too quote unquote capitalist. We recognize ourselves as a business. We had an operation that we had to run efficiently as a business, or else we would not have housing. But then when somebody wouldn't pay for whatever reasons, which often was, some people are used to getting over, and this was an opportunity to get over. So there was a lot of division about what do you do with that? It's like, well, nobody can live anywhere else without paying their rent. Why do they think they can come here and not pay rent? So those kinds of things were issues. So, but I did go on to like spend a lot of time in the worker co-op movement. I was the founding board member for the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, and at one of them representing the East Coast, and worked with a couple of co-ops and did co-op training. So, I have a sense of what it was like. And one of those people, well, not working with them, but I knew Jim Johnson, who was also a GEO member, co-editor, who was in a computer co-op at the time, Sligo Computers. And so that was the closest that I got to really understanding how that work, how co-ops, worker co-ops work. In fact, Jim and I had talked at one time about forming a co-op, and we actually did try to organize a cooperative community in DC. DC has like, well, at that point, I think it had like 150 housing co-ops, and limited equity housing co-ops, and we have two food co-ops, not in DC proper, but on the outskirts, and there were a couple of sunroof solar co-ops. So we were trying to organize a co-op federation here. So we did some co-op work here, but didn't get off the ground. But yeah, I think co-ops really are a great solution, but it is hard work. A lot of people don't want to do the work or can't do the work because of finances, or they don't want to work that hard. um so, and then it takes a lot of passion and heart to deal with people, especially people who don't realize that they are being that their minds have been taken over, and they're operating out of this desire to have power and be in charge and take over, and have the hierarchy thing going on. So yeah, it's co-ops are great, but they take work and a lot of commitment. And we always say not everybody can do co-ops because of the kind of the work that it takes to do it. So that's my co-op, worker co-op, housing co-op story.
Should I go, Josh, or did you want
Yeah.
to move on to something else?
No,
No,
it'd be
no,
great
go
to
for
hear
it.
you.
Um,
Story time.
Story time. Okay. So the essence of cooperativism, I didn't know by that name, but I was searching for that. Um, I think in between like ages 16 and 22. I'm 33 now, and it's around like age 22 that I began to like crystallize it a little bit better. And I think about age like 22, I began to know them as collectives, or um, from learning about like worker takeovers, and I didn't know the term cooperative until maybe like age 26 or something. Maybe age 20, yeah, maybe age 20, as late as age 28 possibly. Um, but definitely like from age 18 and on, I was looking more for people who would be interested in making that, whatever that is, collective, you know. But it was really hard to find anybody who thought like that, and who I could trust to be, to not only to between the between us, but also being interested in not screwing over other people, because that's kind of easy to come across people who are like loyal to you, but yeah, are really willing to team up against anybody else and screw over anybody else. Um, yeah, and there was, I think, up until like 2020, I was really unable to meet a lot of people, and like get on the web to learn more. Um, there's a long period of my life where I couldn't even really read. So kind of only recently that I've been able to get on. I think 2020 I was able to get on the computer again, more often, and kind of like read more, and get
Why
out.
couldn't you read? Was it
Cognition
healthy
problems, like
cognition?
my cognition was going away. Well, I had insomnia from like age 12 to age 28,
Wow.
among other issues. So a lot of like learning and stuff that I wanted to do, or even getting to meet people, I was very limited. It was just like work, and rest. That's it. No room to think. Um, yeah, I've met a lot of people who were interested in unionizing, but they weren't really that interested in unionizing. And I've never been excited about unionizing in the like popular sense. Part of it is because my grandfather, he helped unionize a GM plant, General Motors plant, and he I asked him a lot about the process, and basically uh, he explained to me how his union rose, and uh, the degeneration of the union as well, not only by the workers, but by the rest of the union. I mean, not only the local workers, but also the rest of the workers in the union. And a lot of my family members were part of the UAW, and they explained to me just like how horrible the work was, and the degeneration, and like I just knew that if it's not like meaningfully cooperative, it's just that's what it's going to lead to. So I've never really been excited about worker unionism in the popular sense, because I have an idea of all the forces that people are up against, especially when they're dealing with like national established unions that are already very hierarchical, that are very like already like wedded to hierarchical businesses. But yeah, I think it's around 2018 that my health improved a little bit more. I was able to start getting out a little bit more. Like I really wish it would have been cooler too if there was like more digital meetings in the past. I probably would have learned more even just listening in. I could listen in, just can't really. But yeah, it's around 2018 I started to meet some more people who are interested in talking about cooperatives in different senses, and yeah, there's some folks in Chicago who, in something called Cooperation for Liberation, a study group, and if we're also entertaining the idea of maybe building something together. That's been on hold. We don't know what's gonna happen with that, but I think I started talking to those folks around 2018, maybe 2017.
Question, Chris. Were you there when the U.S. Federation had its conference in Chicago?
It's possible, but I don't remember. I don't remember that happening.
Because I think it was like 2016. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
maybe.
was a big deal.
Uh
Yeah.
huh. Yeah, it's possible. I was also 2016. It's possible I was also in Texas for most of that year. Um, yeah, and I've yeah, I guess maybe I jumped a bit ahead, but when I was younger, I was searching for these models. I didn't have a name to put to them, but I was looking for something that was fairer, and that wasn't so cruel. Because all I saw was like I grew up in the poorest zip code in San Antonio, Texas. All I saw was like pretty ugly poverty, and then we would also go to Mexico sometimes, and the poverty there was even worse. And I understood that the poverty is the further south you go in this hemisphere, the worse the poverty is, and it's more about people being held down, more than anything. And that really, I saw like the contrast in wealth, not only among different different people who are like very oppressed, but even among like the more privileged oppressed people. I saw those contrasts in wealth, and I knew that it was like it doesn't have to be this way. It's all this is, so that's what got me thinking, and at an early age, I skipped school a lot so I can think about this stuff, because the school doesn't. You're not there to think about stuff that this type of stuff. You're there to do tests. Everything's geared toward tests. So I think because I skipped school so much, I was able to kind of think about this stuff at a young age, and I'm kind of glad. Looking back, I'm very glad that I didn't. I really only had one parent, and I'm kind of glad that I only had one parent because I think if I maybe had two parents, then I wouldn't have had as much opportunity to escape oversight. To be able to think to be able to think outside the box, and to um, be able to ignore the cops when they're like knocking at the door for me to go to school. Um, so, but yeah, I was thinking about this stuff at an early age. I just didn't know like where to find it. I didn't know what terms they were. I picked up all sorts of like random books at the library, not at school, but like public library. I would like leave school, hop on a bus, go to different libraries, and just try to learn stuff. Um, uh, and at some point, like the internet came, but internet wasn't that useful for me because I don't know what to type. I don't know what to search for. To me, it was kind of harder to access compared to a library where like there's already like all this information in front of you. You can kind of but yeah. Going back closer to the present. Um, in 2020, there's a few people I've known for maybe 2 to 4 years, and it seemed like their schedules were starting to open up more as a result of the pandemic. But also, it seemed like they were also like thinking more about self-employment, and that's when we started talking about what's essentially co-ops not cages today. And yeah, and it's been tough for everyone else in there. Like their lives have been so terribly affected by the pandemic. Well, at least the government response to the pandemic, the ruling class's response to the pandemic. Um, and yeah, here I am today. Still interested in cooperatives in different ways, and trying to figure out how we can do this together in situations where like there's not these big old grants that are going to come down and help us, that are going to come from the institutions that benefit maybe a bunch of other people, maybe other people in the work co-op movement too, but they're not going to benefit us. So yeah, I mean, I think that probably covers it well enough.
Yeah.
So how did you find co-ops, not cages?
So we were all friends and neighbors who just been working together in different ways. I think between like 2016 to 2020, and we started talking more about trying to do something better, giving ourselves hope because it was just so dreary, especially in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been doing some work with a tenants union, correct?
Yeah, one person in there I met through tenant union stuff. She yeah, big heart. She's got a big heart. Like this, the way that we've helped neighbors, man. It's like you gotta have a big heart to do that kind of stuff. Uh, in our neighborhoods, we're just so easy to get jaded.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know, it sounds, co-ops are obviously like an important thing for all of us, and I think for everybody it seems like something that kind of gives us a hope that there's, some other ways to be and to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, that's why I really I want the worker co-op movement, especially I want worker co-ops to be not just a little bit different, right? And there are plenty of worker co-ops, and we could point to like Mondragon, for instance, or uh, a lot of the larger worker co-ops in the U.S. and elsewhere that are not that different than the corporate um, than the corporate model. And maybe different. We could say, oh well, at Mondragon or some of these large co-ops, they have a 1 to 10 pay differential, or 1 to 9 or something like that. but to me, and that's so much better than the corporate capitalists with their 300-to-1 pay ratios. But it's still the same kind of mentality, right? I mean, to me, it's like we've stepped outside of the box. Like we're not thinking inside the box anymore, but we're like leaning up against the outside of it. It's like we got outside the box, but we don't really want to go too far away. We're still there. And that's why, I'm really drawn to like the Arizmendi Association co-ops and other co-ops that are, really trying to do things a lot more different and not just be a little bit different. But, when you have a flat pay scale, when you're doing job rotation and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, and so that's why when I see things that are called worker co-ops that are not really very different at all. Like we were talking about last month with a co-op that might be 49% owned by investor owners. Like, it's like, no, we need something that's actually different,
Right.
that's,
Yeah, like Mondragon, I went to Mondragon in 2011 and we got to see how they operate. I think it was a washing machine factory. Fago, I believe it was. So one of the things that was different was that people were working teams, and the teams they really do make the decisions, and that's the one thing that I really liked about they handled everything, how much production, problems, every issue, and so it really was participatory management. So yeah, there might be some things that maybe look like your capitalist organization, but that was one of the key differences that I really appreciated was how the workers really are involved in their day-to-day running of those businesses. And not to say that there aren't any issues with Mondragon, but there's different levels of how things can be different. Um, but like one of the problems, I think, was that the Chicago conference? I think at the Chicago conference, there was a guy who really stressed the need for worker co-ops to get into manufacturing. Manufacturing has been declining in this country for years. We basically, at that time, he was saying we don't make anything, and that most of the worker co-ops were like service organizations. But to really gain power and really make a difference, we should go into manufacturing. And it was a really good point. And, it really stuck for me. But, other folks in the movement didn't really, the message didn't land so much with them. But I think we could have really made a difference if we had some kind of movement toward manufacturing and you know, a federation. It was always hard to get everybody who was doing work of co-op work, but they were doing some fantastic stuff. Isthmus Engineering, the co-op South Mountain, building houses, and they were big Equal Exchange, big co-ops, Rainbow Grocery, doing different kinds of things, and it was just really hard to get people to stop and work on some of these issues because they were so busy running their co-ops. But I think
mhm.
we could have made a lot more difference if we had been able to do that.
Yeah, well, it's not too late. I mean, it's definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and especially after the experience with the kombucha co-op, um, is that while we say we want there to be lots of worker co-ops, we want to see a lot more of them. The reality is that in order to do like a startup worker co-op, you have to have a group of people not only who trust each other and who have a sound business idea, but are also like entrepreneurial, who are okay kind of taking those risks and you know it's not just like having a management or an ownership mentality. Like being an entrepreneur is something else. It's I think it's part of like being overly optimistic and like being okay taking lots of risks, and also
Yeah,
like maybe obsessive compulsive and like a workaholic probably helps too. Um,
absolutely. It's a business. You have to put that time in to make it successful.
but most people, I think most people, even including myself, don't necessarily have all of those characteristics. And so, for one, I think that's why we don't see as many. Like, there are way more people who would love to work in a worker co-op than who are going to try to actually start one, because that's a whole different,
Oh yeah,
that's a whole
yeah,
different ball game, starting a business than working
yeah.
one. So, and especially for something large like manufacturing, that's not something where we can depend on like individual entrepreneurship to make that happen. Like that's just right, and the odds are that you're gonna find a small group of people. It's have to be a large group of people to do something on the size of like a factory. So I think like one of the things I've been thinking that we need for worker co-ops is like a fund, an organization maybe that like say, imagine like in a lot of countries where worker co-ops are required by law to contribute some 1% of their net revenue to the co-op development national apex organization or something. You have an some fund of money like that, and a group that says okay, composed of co-op people, like what do we need? Okay, we think, we see a spot for some manufacturing, making washing machines in the US, or, e-bikes or something like that. And actually doing what big corporations would normally do. A big corporation that's going to start a new factory, they don't depend on entrepreneurialism, right? They just
Right.
hire professionals, they do it, and to operate that. And that when we're bringing in worker owners, it's more like you're being hired to work at something that's going to be a worker co-op, rather than trying to like find the people who have the entrepreneurial spirit but also are cooperative, which is like, I don't think there's a whole lot of overlap in that Venn diagram there. So yeah, so so I think for manufacturing, I'd love to see more of it. I'm not real up to date on, or I don't really know what the history of isthmus engineering is, like how they got that thing going, like where they got their capital from. Um, and I mean, they're big enough, but we could. It's still only like 50 people if we're talking, real manufacturing, large scale. Yeah, it would require coordination from the movement as a movement, right? Not just like
Hmm.
as individuals, I think. But definitely something food for thought and further discussion.
Yeah, I wonder which are already positioned to kind of do that. Because I talked to one or two of the work owners of um, New Era Windows in Chicago.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think like in 2019 or 2018. And at that
Hmm.
time, I think they're still at the same location, but one of them was telling me that one of the problems that they have is that they need a bigger building because they can produce a lot more. Um,
Hmm.
and but they can't get access to a bigger building to move their operations. Um, so in that case, it didn't seem like, not sure to what extent money was really the issue, and that just like finding that space was more the
Hmm.
issue. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if it might be easier than people think, and it might not require as much money. Maybe it's some other stuff that, and New Year Windows. I was surprised in I think in 2018 or like 2019 to discover that one of the basic needs that they had was just help with onboarding new people into worker cooperative culture.
Hmm.
It's I which is kind of like kind of like an easy thing that can be done, but I think part of it is in Chicago, which just the whole siloing thing in Chicago, how like a lot of people are not as connected. Um, just like that peer support not being as deeply ingrained. Um,
But it's not as easy as you think. I managed a business for a nonprofit. It was an ice cream shop. And I tried to have a culture where the workers could have say so in how we did things. And there was one woman who I was training to be like the assistant manager, told me, I don't want that. I don't, I just want to come in and get my check and go home. So that really like slapped me in the face. It's like, okay, you might think this is a great idea, but a lot of people are just used to the way this system operates, and they don't want to have any kind of say so or control or anything in how their job is. That was a really tough lesson.
Mm. Yeah, and and do they actually believe it too? I mean, it's also I think a matter of just convincing somebody. I mean, one, why should if I can just come and do what my work and get a paycheck, and if I don't have any real say so, and then yeah, even if you as the manager are trying to convince them of that, like it's a tough sell. I worked at the nursing home. I worked as a housekeeper. Our manager was the most cooperative, like just a naturally cooperative person. And every Friday, despite the fact we worked in this capitalist hellhole, she would have a meeting of the maintenance staff and the housekeeping staff, and anybody who has any suggestions for any changes we want to make, go ahead. If anybody wants to change anything, we'll try it for a week, talk about it. Did
That's
anybody ever say
great.
anything? I don't think so, but it didn't stop her from trying to get that. Um, but
Right,
people, we're so not used to it.
right.
I wanted to mention we do have somebody in the chat here. He says Marco Padilla says his tech worker co-op just joined a union, which is good to hear. We like more union co-ops. Although I'm definitely hoping that our co-op culture rubs off on the unions. Uh, Maybe not the opposite so much. I wonder if you want to tell us what union you joined. That would be interesting to know. He also says his dream is to organize a worker co-op autoclaved aerated concrete company. I have
Mm.
no idea what that is. An
It sounds good.
autoclave is how you clean medical instruments or something, and aerated concrete, I have no clue.
It sounds new.
Chris, you have any insight on autoclaved aerated concrete?
No, I'm just hoping that we'll be able to get a description before we get off.
Yeah, I think you may have made that up.
But there
No.
was there were a lot of tech co-ops in the movement, in the worker co-op movement when it first started. That was the thing.
Yeah.
That's the easiest thing for people to have done. It was to set up a tech co-op. Jim was in one, and there were like three or four or more.
Oh, and
Uh,
we still have a bunch. I mean, there are several around. We've got Polycot, we've got Co I think is what they're called. Um, Agaric,
oh yeah.
Boston Tech Collective, San Francisco Tech Collective. Um,
Did the one in
there's
Louisiana survive? Told something. They got kind of flooded out because of Katrina, but I don't know if they survived.
I don't know, but yeah, I know that there are quite a few tech co-ops. I mean, that's a very broad description, like the Boston and San Francisco tech collectives. I think they're doing mostly like tech support for just consumer, home computers, and then you've got people that are making bespoke software for business applications and stuff like that, and um, lots of other things. Let's see. Marco says it's just concrete that's more popular in Europe and Japan. Only one other AAC concrete company in the U.S., so it's a good market. The
Hmm,
union we joined was CWA, Communication Workers of America.
of
Great,
America. Okay,
awesome.
interesting. Yeah, it sounds like a good business if nobody else is doing it, and they're going to be bringing some new technology to this country.
Yeah, yeah, concrete. I know it's a big environmental concern.
Is that
So
the
if it's
stuff you need?
if it's got a better environmental footprint, we're all for it.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about some kind of way you can put well, some kind of surface on the ground that is not like concrete that allows water to go through and not have runoffs on the street and everywhere. I wonder if that's the
Hmm.
same kind of thing. Aerated.
Hmm.
I don't know if aerated
Oh,
just means it has holes that would allow
right.
water to go through or what,
I could
but
I could see that. Yeah.
yeah, some new technology.
Permeable, some kind of permeable concrete or something.
Yeah, yeah, for
Um,
driveways and stuff.
but so yeah, there's definitely um, plenty of ideas out there for co-ops. I think what it's the we're not missing the money is what I think at this point anyway. Is what I keep getting told from people who are connected to these community development financial institutions and revolving loan funds and stuff. Like, we have money to lend, we just don't have good business ideas, enough people
Oh,
asking
that's
for
interesting.
support. um, yeah. And I have to say, there's one thing. I was listening to an interview that All Things Co-op did with Kevin. I can't, I'm blanking on his last name, from Works Cooperative,
Hmm.
t-shirt printing, and they also do, like, I think, mugs and bags and all kinds of stuff. Um, but he said he went once to a seminar that was on worker cooperative failures, and he was very interested to hear what they had to say, and he's like, and I went and I listened, and I didn't hear anything about worker co-op failures, really. I mean, they were worker co-ops that failed, but he's like, I just heard there was a bad business plan that didn't work out. Like, it's like you hear the business plan, like, oh, that's not going to work.
Hmm.
And I think there's we could stand to focus more on that kind of thing. What I would actually like to see is, like, kind of business plans in a box for, like a franchise kind of model. Like, the Arizmendi Association, they definitely know how to run a bakery co-op,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Hmm.
um, and things like home care, housekeeping, janitorial, stuff that's just needed everywhere. That
Right.
you could, if you it'd be so nice to be able to say, like, okay, here is a business plan, here's how you're going to do a market survey, or and like, you're what you're going to need to set it up, and the hoops you'll have to jump through. I mean, that would be so helpful.
Hmm.
um,
Yep.
Sean Anderson says our co-op of nonprofit a nonprofit teachers worker co-op desperately needs funding. Who should we reach out to? If you're in the US, so this is all US based, Shared Capital, the Seed Commons, those would be the two that are that work nationally. Also, you can, I believe, Leaf, the local economic assistance fund. I believe they also work nationally, but at least those three organizations, Shared Capital, Seed Commons, and Leaf, should be able to help you out. If you're in another country besides the US, you'd have to ask somebody there. Yeah, Chris, you're muted.
What has been y'all's experience uh, talking to like credit unions locally? We had in Chicago one uh, a local cooperator. Um, he told me that he went to he and I are in the same credit union. He went to one of the branches and he talked to like one of the manager there. I think one of the managers,
Hmm.
and asked about what kind of funding do they have for the community, and they said, well, we have like $1 million, maybe even more. And they're like, and we want to spend it on stuff like what you're talking about, which was cooperatives, including worker cooperatives. They're like, but we just don't know anybody who's doing that,
Wow.
in the neighborhoods. And so I was like, man, that's really cool that you took the initiative to go talk to, one of the local managers at that branch. And so I'm wondering, like, are there credit unions that are in similar situations where they're interested in spending money like that? They just nobody's approaching them, or they can't connect. They're not that connected to like what's going on and what's new. So that's something that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's a good point because there's that gap. People don't know that they can do that, and the institutions need to make it more well known. And that's where a federation would come in, or people who are, looking at those kinds of things. Um, but yeah, that's sad because I'm sure that there's a need for a lot of worker co-ops, and if we had some plans that people can get into, I think the big thing would be the training. But just the idea of getting people together to create a business, like you said, Josh, everybody needs a janitorial business or, lots of stuff that people can just do to create their own jobs. So, yeah, maybe that's one of the things that will come out of this is that people will know that stuff like this is available.
I don't know if it's useful to say this, but maybe I should say it. The credit union um, is let's see, it's Seaway, a division of Self Help, and the location was let's see, 645 East 87th Street in Chicago, Illinois. I don't know. Maybe it's good to be a little more specific about stuff like this. So, and there's more like Self Help and Seaway, Second Federal. It's like the credit union's weird. It's got all these different names in other states as well. It's not just in Illinois.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure there are people in Chicago that need some kind of co-op, daycare or adult centers or all kinds of things. People
Yeah,
have the ideas.
yeah. I mean, and there's definitely a need for more connection and communication between credit unions specifically and other types of co-ops because a lot of credit union people don't really, it seems like anyway, or often I'm told, don't really get that they're part of the larger
Co-op
co-op movement,
movement. Yeah.
especially like the employees and stuff. But a lot of and there have the credit unions do have a lot of limitations that banks don't have as far as their lending for businesses specifically. They were mostly kind of set up to do like more like mortgage lending and that kind of thing. Um, so it can be hard for them to like fund worker co-ops. Uh, but if yeah, they're aligned organizations who are also cooperatives, and it can't hurt to reach out to your local credit union and see because you might find out they have some community fund or something that um, might be a good source of funding for some cooperative or community project. Um, yeah,
And also the banks, they have they're required to do community investment and so they may be interested in supporting some local co-ops or other projects just to say that they're doing something good for the community.
hmm yes. With that, I would first say like be careful who you take money from. You don't want to like be helping somebody launder their reputation.
This is true. This is true.
But you're right. There's the Community Reinvestment Act or whatever. There's some requirements for putting some money back in. Yes, and not all banks and bankers are evil.
Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely could use some more connections with our credit union folks. Um, Marco Padilla says, oh, well, so I'll read. Sean Anderson said, Shared Capital is helping out with some short term loans. I was going to look into the other two. And Marco says maybe we should reach out to state unemployment departments regarding Marcora Law style funding. Um,
What
and
kind of?
the Marcora Law, I believe that in Italy or Spain. I think that's the law that says like co-ops put a percentage of their
Ah.
net revenue into an
Hmm.
organization. Although I could be wrong.
That's funny because I was trying to do a co-op once when I was unemployed to try to
Oh
get
no.
people to do that. What?
Okay, I'm wrong. The Marcora Law. Thank God for DuckDuckGo. It supports worker buyouts.
Mm.
So I think this is like it's like maybe a first right of refusal or something like that. Um, okay. So anyway, I just wanted to correct myself.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it is in Italy. The Marcora Law in Italy was instrumental in facilitating employee buyouts, primarily by providing a framework that enables collaboration among all of the various stakeholders involved in the process and making available financial support schemes to help the enterprises navigate difficult financial conditions. Okay.
Do we have anything like that here? That would definitely be needed because, we lose a lot of businesses that way that might be family owned and they want to give it to the workers, but there's no well, I guess there was a center, employee ownership center,
Mm-hmm.
that helped people do that. But I don't know, a big fund would really be good to help businesses become co-ops or employee owned businesses. And that
Mm-hmm.
way you can start to reintroduce people or introduce people to co-op culture and how that's supposed to work, gradually. And they get it. It's probably going to be a long process because we're so used to being individuals and only thinking about ourselves and not looking at the whole. So, but that's in everything in this country. We really have to do de-brainwashing a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it is, yeah, we've been brainwashed and we don't even realize that we have. We think that's just the way that things are
Right.
until, you know, for some of us, it's until you get out of the country and you realize, oh, other people's cultures are way different. And
Yeah.
they just I went to Nepal, right? And I'm in the village with my friends and it's harvest time and they have this system that they've had for a couple thousand years now where, you know, everybody's like piece of land has a day assigned to it and on that day everybody from the like every family has to send one worker to that piece of land to go harvest it. So you get your land harvest, you have the whole village come to harvest your land one day and then you go and,
I
you know,
love that.
and everybody gets taken care of and it's just like it's like an obvious thing to them that that's like how you would do it, of course, and they make it like a big party and they drink a little Roxy and sing some songs while you're threshing the wheat and stuff, and it's great.
Hmm.
And it's sometimes just trying to coordinate the simplest things in this country can just be like pulling teeth. um, but yeah, I just wanted to Marco is chiming in here in the chat, says, so his idea for a Marcora style law would be instead of taking your unemployment claim month to month, you could pool your claim with 9 other workers to start a worker co-op.
Ooh,
Or maybe that's how the Marcora law works. But yeah,
I love it.
that would be
Yeah.
something. Yeah, and if we had something set up to support that, right? Because that's what I found. I mean, with the kombucha co-op, even though it wasn't successful, at the end of it, still it wouldn't have even gotten as far as it did if it hadn't been for so much help that we all got from people like Jim that I could just call and he would gave us a couple of hours of his time. People at the Montana Co-op Development Center, just co-op people in general, who are so ready to help and to assist. And yeah, and even the level that we got, we were so grateful for it, but it's like we could have used a whole lot more.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, oh yeah, so Marco says that is how the Marcora law works, and the state has 40% of their businesses as worker co-ops. Yeah,
Wow,
not too shabby.
that's impressive.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's one thing that Mondragon did that I like too. Is like they were anybody who had an idea, they could go to school, a Mondragon school, and they would help them develop their idea. It didn't have to be a co-op, but they would help them do the research and business surveys and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff to come up with their idea. which I thought was really brilliant. We need something like that here. 'Cause people have great ideas, but it's usually they down the vine because money, usually, or
Yeah.
maybe not knowing how to do the research, the market research. But, you know,
Well,
Hmm.
hopefully we'll be getting closer to that, like from grassroots initiative, the Co-op Connection Network effort. We had like 10 new people wanting to join, so it's kind of like got this little growth spurt.
Wow.
A
oh,
lot of their
All
wonderful.
right.
peer support, like who signed up and want to get added to the map, and they have like all these interests. They want to connect with other worker cooperators, and they're at different stages in their journey. So hopefully, if that
Excellent.
keeps going, we can see more stuff just blossoming from the grassroots.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I know that there's a listserv for psychologist worker cooperatives. Get this,
Mm.
right? So there's two already, at least two that I know of. I interviewed one of them, Alliance in New York City, and then there's another one, I think maybe in Chicago, um, Catalyst, I think it's called. And there are enough other psychologists and mental health workers who are interested in starting their own worker co-op practices that they have a listserv. Now, they had to just set up like a listserv for
Oh, that's
everybody because it
wonderful.
got to be too much. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that kind of going on below the surface that you don't really see, but this kind of grassroots support. So,
Yeah,
Hmm.
Catalyst is out in the east, but I know at least
oh,
one of their members has been helping out some Chicagoans who are getting into
maybe it
psychotherapy.
is
And
people wanting to set one up in Chicago. Yeah,
yeah,
I can't keep track of all
I
of them.
have their emails, but no response back yet. Because one of our Sarah, who helps out in co-ops and cages, um, she's gonna become a psychotherapist as well, and she is really interested
Nice.
in going down that path. Um,
Excellent.
um, yeah, one of the cool things that I'm hoping that Catalyst does end up doing is they have an idea of basically how to. They're thinking about building up a way to where people can develop like a community-based uh, healing, mental health
Mm.
healing for
Mm-hmm.
free. They're trying to develop, they're just like removing money out. They're trying to remove money out of the equation so people can just start building the stuff up without having to rely on any institutions or insurance. Just do it together. I'm really hoping that happens. Um, and if people need support, I mean, if people need to support them, that'd be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people, a lot of people can't afford to go to psychotherapists. It's just
Hmm.
not in this economy. Nah, it ain't gonna happen for so many people.
Right.
And in my opinion, I don't think that whole like just like the problems that we face, we need to be building communities of healing, not like more just regular psychotherapy one on one. I think
Mm-hmm.
communities of healing,
Mm-hmm. I
make
like
group
that idea,
processes.
Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything
Yeah.
starts with a thought.
Mhm. Indeed. And maybe everything ends with a thought too. We've gone half an hour over, which
Wow.
is it's good.
That
I'm
was
happy. See,
fast.
time just flies. Yeah. See,
Yeah.
we get talking, and we actually had people watching and commenting and everything. So
Cool.
it feels like a real thing. So yeah, if anybody has any closing words, now's the time.
Well, I say let's try to throw some ideas out and see where they land and see how we can help, at least in Geo,
All right.
do a little story about it.
Yes, and if you have have a story that you'd like to share on Geo, send us an email at editors@geo.coop. We would love to hear it. And yeah, and just go to geo.coop, subscribe to the newsletter, make a donation, all that good stuff. Subscribe, like, share,
And
blah, blah, blah.
subscriptions are free.
Yes, subscribe to the weekly newsletter. It's free. So, yeah, I think that is all. And we shall say good night.
Good night.
Good night.